think about all the albums he could have chose to do a tour around, and The River is probably not the album that would have been top of anyone's list in terms of the casual fan. If you want to sell tickets, you're going to do Born in the USA or Born to Run. But he went with The River, which I thought was very unique. I mean, great choice. I would have loved to have seen that tour. Obviously, if he ever wants to do Nebraska, I'll swallow my pride and say, no, yeah, do Nebraska, do
Yeah, yeah.
Nebraska. Yes, we want an album tour, but I don't think seeing Bruce is so much about what songs he plays. It's about experiencing the energy of it and the communal feeling of being in the same room with people who have that same experience in life as you and want to share something. It's a lot of people don't like U2, a lot of people worship U2, but for me, I appreciate them on every level, and I think they put on one of the best shows in rock and roll. And when you see them, and I saw them at the Rose Bowl doing the Joshua Tree tour, there's something about seeing a band like that being able to connect with 60, 70,000 people and make you feel like you're in the front row. And there's very few artists that can do that. And so for Bruce, it doesn't really matter what he plays. He can play all of Western Stars, and the energy and the passion is going to be just as good as if he does some dark, deeper cuts off of The River, Asbury Park, any of those. So I think for him, he has that flexibility. He doesn't have to play the quote unquote hits because the power of his show is going to more than make up for that. And there's not a lot of artists that can do that. I mean, in terms of live performance, I put him up there right at the top with, I think U2 always delivers. If we want to go country, I think Garth Brooks is a phenomenon on live. So, those artists truly transcend just their songs and just about the experience of being there.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Listing Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. We're kind of sort of getting off the Bruce train today, but he will come up as he normally does. My friend Jason is joining me today. Jason, you just said you had a stay vacation, so you're ending your vacation week talking to me. I am honored.
I am so excited to talk to you. I do a lot with 80s music, and I do a lot of Duran Duran events. I do a lot of 80s DJing, but I never really get to talk about Bruce. So
Yeah.
I'm so excited to talk about Bruce and some of my other favorite bands. So perfect ending to a great week. It's 110 degrees today in Las Vegas, so I am in the air conditioning talking to you, and that's where I want to be.
I have the same thing. I'm in Dallas, Texas. It was 110 on my way home, according to the car thermometer. So, and I am in the air conditioning too. So I'm very grateful.
Thoughts and
Yeah.
prayers to your power grid. I hope it stays on.
Yeah. So that is whoa, from your mouth to God's ear. Yes. Our very stubborn state government. We don't need to be part of anyone. Oh, sorry. So yeah. Well, let's start out. Jason, tell us a little about yourself.
Well, my name's Jason. Online, I go by Velvet Rebel Music, and I grew up in New York City. My dad was a musician, so I always grew up with music around the house. I'm at that weird age where I literally discovered music via MTV. When MTV started was almost the exact moment I started getting into music. So for me, music was very visual from day one, and that's kind of stayed with me throughout my life. For good or worse, you kind of look at it both ways. But so that was kind of how I got into music, and I've always kind of worked around music. I've played in bands, currently doing a lot of DJing. I'm a music writer, concert photographer, and I've also worked in the hospitality industry. I've been lucky to work for people like Jimmy Buffett. I got to open his place out in Hawaii, worked there for several years, and now working with Hard Rock Cafe in Las Vegas, which is a dream come true. I mean, every day I get to walk into work and see memorabilia from people like Bruce Springsteen. And I get to work with one friend of mine, and we actually do a lot of the music curation for the company. So when you go into a Hard Rock Cafe and hear the videos playing, if they're good, you can give me credit. If you hate it, you can blame my buddy. But it's fun. We balance each other well. We have a great lineup of Springsteen videos. So I love when a Boss fan comes in because I can put on something like Candy's Room, something a little outside the norm, and just blow them away.
Oh, that's great. What kind of musician was your father?
He was a guitar player. He played in a garage band in the 60s in New York City. They were called the Duquesnes. They cut a couple songs actually at the studio near Times Square where Liza Minnelli cut her first tracks. And they would play around the New York City, the proms, the school dance, Battle of the Bands. They played a few shows with the Vagrants, which was Leslie West's first band. Many years later, my dad told me, he's like, yeah, the best guitar player ever started with this really big built guy named Leslie West. He was amazing. I'm like, Dad, Leslie West. He went on to form Mountain, with Mr. Popularity and Felix Popularity and all these amazing musicians. And he's like, really? Because he left and went off to Vietnam to serve, so he kind of lost touch with the music industry. And then he came back and just started. He had me, so he had to start raising a family. But he's retired now in Florida. He's actually gigging again. He does solo gigs for the VFWs and things like that. So he actually got to go back to his first love, which is music.
I always love that. My brother-in-law is just hitting in his early 70s, and he talked about that. If he could do anything, he would bring all his buddies back from like high school, meet in a barn once a Sunday, and just play for no one, right? And I mentioned that I was when I first started podcasting, my wife was like, who's going to listen to you? And I'm like, well, I don't know if anyone will listen to me, but you know how your brother Ralph said that just the joy of making music is enough for him? I said, that's kind of what I'm doing this for. And then it clicked with her, like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Yeah. You mentioned, Jason, MTV. And so we're going to resist the joke of making, I'm going to resist the opportunity to make the joke about when MTV played videos, because that's what everyone makes now. But I do remember, I graduated high school in 77, but I remember that 80, like we were jealous that our video, like in the early 80s, our channel lineup did not include MTV, right? And once you got it, you were just thrilled that you were doing. And that would be like many people put on ESPN now, or CNN or something. Man, you would just stick MTV on and just have it playing in the background, wouldn't you?
It was a video radio station. I mean, I had my parents' records and I'd listen to them
Yeah.
occasionally. But for me, it was just this portal into a giant world. I mean, look at the early, I got really into bands like Duran Duran. They're shooting videos
Hmm.
all over the world. It
Yeah.
was like Raiders of the Lost Ark set to music at times. And it was an amazing way to experience music. But there was that weird disconnect where, instantly certain artists would appear on MTV and they would look old, or you would think this band was brand new and just cutting edge, and you'd find out later most of their best stuff happened in the 70s. I mean, it was probably 10, 15 years of listening to Peter Gabriel before I ever made the connection they had been in Genesis in the 70s. Or
Yeah.
Hard, we're watching Hard and they're all dressed up in their weird corsets and stuff. And then, find out Barracuda and Magic Man stuff had already happened. I'm like, what? This isn't a new band?
Yeah.
So it was a really weird way to discover music. And, it actually, I think, hampered my appreciation of Bruce early on because, Born in the USA was so massive. But the way it was used, especially, by Reagan and people like that, Bruce was already obviously older and established, so it didn't seem as in touch when he hit MTV as some of the newer videos I was really obsessed with, whether it was Howard Jones or Thompson Twins. So my road to get into Bruce was actually delayed a little bit because of MTV.
The well, since you brought it up, when did you first kind of click what the uniqueness of Bruce's music, and what about it, when it did speak to you, what about it, why did it speak to you?
Well, like I said, Born in the USA just didn't click for me. But
Right.
then I always thought I'm on Fire was a brilliant video, and I still do. I think that's a fantastic one. But
Yeah.
Tunnel of Love, I actually thought when I heard it, I started getting a little away from that, synth pop and stuff, getting more into like guitar driven rock, and also looking back at the history of music. So I appreciated Tunnel of Love, but it wasn't until my new favorite band at the time in the 80s, a band called Cowboy Junkies coming out of Canada. I got into them right out of the gates. Just saw the video for their cover of Lou Reed's Sweet Jane.
Hmm.
Once I heard them doing Sweet Jane, I was like, this band is different. It's totally unlike anything else on MTV. So really dove right into them, and just something clicked with them. And They originally had an album out before the big Trinity Session album, which exploded, made a lot of best of albums, got them on Saturday Night Live. But before that, they did an album called White's Off Earth Now. And it was mostly blues covers, but there was a Springsteen cover on it called State Trooper. And, that album was pointing me back to people like Robert Johnson, John Lee Hooker, getting really into early blues and Delta blues. But also that State Trooper cover was haunting. It was very slowed down, and just the way it was paced and the way the instrumentation was, the guitars were coming at you from different sides. And it was almost like the grinding gears of a car. I mean, it sounded like this, you're on the road in the middle of the night. And I was like, okay, maybe it's time to go back and revisit Bruce. And that's when I went back to the Nebraska album. And once I heard Nebraska, it just all opened up to me and it just made sense. And, I think a lot of fans of rock and roll were drawn to the underdogs. We love that story of the people wanting to escape their normal lives and things like that. So once you start digging into that, and Nebraska was kind of my gateway into the earlier stuff. And then once I heard Thunder Road, that was it. Because, to me, to this day, I'll say that is the greatest American rock and roll song ever recorded. So then I was hooked. And then it was easy to move forward with that stuff and stay in touch with Bruce and get excited about him. But I actually didn't see him to the early 2000s, which is, now that I went back and looked at some of my shows, I was like, how did it take that long?
Yeah. You mentioned you had a story about Thunder Road with the Cowboy Junkies, right?
Yeah, Cowboy Junkies, massive fans of Bruce Springsteen. They've done 5 covers: State Trooper, My Father's House, Brothers Under the Bridge. To me, I think my favorites, apart from State Trooper, is You're Missing, which is just so beautiful.
Yeah.
But Margot always talked about how much she loved Bruce Springsteen, huge fan. And I was one of those dorks that would go to show after show with Cowboy Junkies. I'd take a week off of work and, go to 3-4 shows in a row. And they're not that big of a band where it's hard to get in touch with them. They're just incredibly gracious and friendly because they're Canadian. So,
Yes.
Being that dorky guy back, kind of lingering near the backstage door, I got to know them, and they learned to trust me as a fan, that I wasn't some crazy person who's going to bother them. And they would bring me into sound checks, and, I got really good at, staying to the back of the room and watching sound check, which, as a music fan, there's something about watching a sound check and a show come together and how they interact. And, for me, it was rock and roll heaven. And sometimes I'd give them CDs, and one I put on it, I actually gave them a mixed CD for the bus, which at the time seemed kind of cool. Hey, here's a mixed CD for the bus.
Yeah.
But the first song on it, I was like, and Thunder Road's #1. So maybe someday you could do Thunder Road. And, a couple years later, they did. So they ended up covering Thunder Road. I don't want to take any credit for it. I'm sure it was just random, but I was like, that worked. So I was so excited to do Thunder Road.
Yeah. When we originally did our few emails back and forth, you said that you've seen Cowboy Junkies multiple times. So I always preface this question when I ask it about Bruce. So I'll do the same thing. The amount of times you've seen a band live is not a fair barometer of how big of a fan you are, because a lot of things can drive that: economic situation, your where you live, how old you are. But you've got a pretty decent you've seen them a few times, haven't you?
Yeah, I'm actually seeing them in 2 weeks down in Phoenix for 2 shows. And
Okay.
if my calculations are correct, and I mean, there's a couple of record store in appearances, I'm like,
Yeah.
not, but it will definitely put me over 120 shows, maybe 121, depending how we count a few of them. So I guess that's kind of crazy, but we're on a Springsteen podcast here, and I feel like there's plenty of Bruce fans who've seen him 200-300 times. So
Yes,
I'm not the
absolutely.
crazy one here.
Yeah, no, in fact, it's really funny because, when I'll talk to someone, I'll say I've only seen Bruce live 17 times. And they're like, 17? That's crazy. I'm like, you have no idea, right? Like, no, I'm in the low end. My first show was the Rising show, 2002 was the first time I saw him. You mentioned was the 2000. What was your first show?
I saw him first time Pepsi Center, Denver,
Okay.
2002, Rising Tour.
Yeah.
Notable set list because I'm a Rocker was played for the first time in forever.
Oh, nice.
Then a year later, the tour came back through and they did the stadium. So I saw him at Invesco Field, and
Okay.
he opened with Bob Seger's Get Out of Denver.
Oh, nice.
And being a Tunnel of Love fan, it was great because he did a Tunnel of Love right into Brilliant Disguise that night. Great show. But for me, both those shows were missing something very important to me as a fan. He didn't play Thunder Road. So July 2012, I was at the Hyde Park show where Paul McCartney, the guy who plays bass in a band called the Beatles,
Yes.
he showed up for the encore. And but the for me, the best moment of the night was the first song that night. He came out and did Thunder Road with just Roy on piano, and it was just like Hammersmith in '75, based on the recordings I've heard.
Yeah.
It was He came out and he just said hi to everyone. He said wanted to thank everyone in the UK from when I
Yeah.
first came to these shores in '75. I was like, what? And then John Fogerty was there. He came out for Promised Land. Of course, Paul was there. Tom Morello. It was one of the most just mind blowing
That
concerts.
that sounds amazing. You know, same thing with me. The first 7 times I saw him, he didn't play Thunder Road. I just kept like, how have I not seen Thunder Road? And then when he was touring for the High Hopes tour, um, he was playing either Thunder Road to close it out, or he would do Dream Baby Dream with a little pump organ. And I love Dream Baby Dream. I love that cover, and I never got it. And I was like, I'm not going to complain that I get Thunder Road though, right? Like I would have liked to do that. Was that where they pulled the plug on him during the encore, that show?
They did, and I mean, we have been rocking for hours and hours.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think the media made that a bigger deal than it was. It didn't seem like that huge of a deal, and a lot of
Yeah.
us had to catch the tube anyway. So, and we knew it was getting close to time where we wouldn't get the last train. So,
Hmm.
it didn't seem like the end of the world. But yeah, it turned into a really good media story, and of course,
Yeah.
they played together the following year at the same Hard Rock Calling Festival to kind of finish what they started, type thing. So,
Yeah.
it all worked out.
Yeah, I think it's funny as we're recording this, right, that Bruce showed up to play, in the Jersey when Paul was playing in Jersey, and they did a couple of songs together. And then, like just a couple weeks later, Paul was in the UK and Bruce happened to be there and played again. So I guess if all works out, Bruce can be Paul's sidekick,
Yeah.
right?
And right now, after the last couple of years with people being off the road, just play as much as you can, get it out there. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
Brett Michaels, Poison, he was in the hospital the other day. Carlos Santana just
Hmm.
passed out on stage, which sounds
Yeah.
like it was good there. My friend's his guitar tech. So I
Hmm.
immediately was like, I know he was the first one to run on stage. So,
Hmm.
we're all getting older, and, this music is so important to us and it's precious. So let's enjoy it while we can. So Bruce, Paul, do a tour together. I mean, whatever you
Yeah.
charge, we'll pay it. I mean, it's
Yeah,
fine.
exactly. It is, I do get the feeling that as eager as we are to get live music again, I think they're all eager to play it again. I know that the first concert I went after all the COVID was, we had bought tickets for the Eagles were touring, doing Hotel California in its entirety. Um, and with Vince Gill, sitting in, and we got to see it. And Don Henley made a joke about, this has been a long time waiting, right? Like it postponed a couple of times, and so it was good to be, to hear live music again. And we all had our little masks on in the the auditorium or stadium, but it was really cool just to see live music again.
Yeah, it's like, let's get out and see shows. I mean, we're lucky in
Yeah.
Vegas. There's nonstop shows coming through, and we actually have a little program. You can log into a website as a member, and most of the Vegas concerts turn out to be free
Yeah.
because the casinos just want to fill the rooms. I actually
Yeah.
keep an eye on the app because I'm hoping Morrissey pops up for free tomorrow night.
Oh,
But
nice.
anyone from Queen to Iron Maiden, I
Yeah.
remember I grabbed 4 tickets for James Taylor at Caesar's Palace. Unbelievable. Like 4 free tickets. So I grabbed them. No one would go with me. So I went and said James Taylor by myself. But I'm like, I'm not missing James Taylor. We're all getting older. I need to see these acts.
Well, so you will appreciate this story, I hope. James Taylor and Jackson Brown were touring together, and just this past year, right? And
Mhm.
or beginning of this year, I guess. And the tickets were really expensive in Fort Worth. Like it had sold out, and they were only, secondary market. But I looked in New Orleans, they were still selling them, for market price. They had open seats and actually pretty good seats. So I joked, my wife and I spent, $2,000 because yeah, we flew to New Orleans. We stayed 3 days. We did a mini vacation to save a couple $100 because we didn't want to pay, but we made an adventure out of it.
But it's the principle too. Do not give money to the scalpers at StubHub.
Exactly. Yeah.
We're flying next month. Wife and I are flying in New York City. I've never seen a show at Madison Square Garden, which just I have to.
Yeah, no, that would I haven't either, but I would think as many times as you, that would have been something off your bucket list already.
And I haven't. So we're going there to see Duran Duran, and they're playing Vegas a week after. But the Vegas tickets, I mean, last I looked, front rows are going for about $1,800 because the scalpers just cleaned out the venue. And I mean, I know Bruce was one of the first to put up the fight, but we've made no progress. Ticketmaster is just, for me, it's really taken the fun out of live music. And I mean, the fees, but also the way they have their own secondary market built into their website. I mean, there's nothing stopping them from shifting tickets there. And this new post-COVID thing, this dynamic pricing where if a lot of people want to go, the price just magically goes up. I mean, I don't know what the answer is, but it's actually, I'm so excited for music again, but then this has really taken my enthusiasm out for buying tickets. So I think I'm going to end up going to less shows because it's just not worth the hassle of spending that kind of money. I mean, no one has $500-$600 to spend on a concert.
Yeah, I am, I'm saving my dollars to try to, Bruce has already announced European dates, and so we're expecting US dates anytime. So, I'm hoping to catch as many US shows as I can for that very reason. You never know. I went 2 weeks ago. Brian Wilson was touring again, and he was not in good shape. It was actually a little sad. He had a walker
on the store that it's not good.
No, he had a walker to get there, and I've kind of used the fact, I remember someone doing a documentary or talking about that, toward the end of Elvis's life, he just had accepted the fact that he was overweight, and his fans accepted it too, and they just kind of moved on. So I had kind of accepted the fact that Brian was going to sit behind the piano, not talk, not play the piano, but sing. And he was not very strong voice this time. And I kind of was like, I don't know if I'll go again, because he was my first musical obsession. Beach Boys' Endless Summer, that 8-track tape was, like, oh my goodness, I'd never heard anything like that. On the other hand, Chicago is who was touring with them, 2 or 3 of the original band members, and they sounded really good. So as a kid of the 70s, that brought me back all of those, songs on the radio that I listened to on my AM radio. So yeah, that was a lot of fun.
I was a big 80s Chicago fan. I actually saw them in high school. We were so into those 80s albums. And again, another band where pre-MTV, I had no idea that they existed.
Yeah.
Chicago 18 should have been a hint. There were 17 albums I didn't know about.
Well, I remember I wore out Chicago 9, that greatest hits 8-track, and it was a fun show. It was a feel, though the buddy I was with said, how do you not start every show with beginnings? Like, shouldn't you if you're Chicago, you start the show with beginnings, just for the pun of it. Let's talk a little bit about your day gig right now with Hard Rock Cafe. How did you end up working in that, which is kind of almost, as you said, a dream job, right? Like you're just hanging out and looking at music memorabilia and searching it out and finding it, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's rock and roll. I mean, I've been in the hospitality industry ever since I finished graduate school. A master's degree in literature doesn't get you far these days. So I went into feeding people in the hospitality business. I grew up in Florida, so when I had the opportunity to live in Hawaii and work for Jimmy Buffett, that was a dream come true because I was a parrot head growing up, and it really loved music. And it's interesting, his fan base is kind of evolved in an interesting way over the years and become a lot more conservative, where I feel like the Bruce community still gets what Bruce is all about in his vision and, what we're trying to do to make this world a better place. But after Jimmy Buffett, I needed a break, and Cowboy Junkies were doing a huge tour in 2010. And I may have watched the film Almost Famous a few too many times. Uh,
Okay.
and I looked in the mirror and realized I'm not as young as that kid is. So this is my last chance. So I reached out to Cowboy Junkies, who, by then I was probably at 60, 70, maybe 80 shows, plenty of shows. So, we knew each other well enough, and they always have a tour diary on their website where they'd come through a town and write about each experience and stuff. I said, look, I'm trying to grow as a music writer. I need a break from a career. I'm like, if I come on the road with you in 2010, can I write the tour diary? Can I take the pictures and stuff? And, they were like happy to hand it off to me. They're like, well, there's only so much we can write about Houston on our 18th time through Houston. No offense.
Sure.
But they're like, yeah, that'd be a fun way to get a fresh perspective. And they welcomed me on the tour. I mean, I was saved up money to make sure I could do this. It wasn't a paid gig in any way, though sometimes I was able to get the hotel room after everyone headed out to the next city.
Right.
And when that tour wrapped up, it was time to find a job. And, I knew some people who had moved over to Hard Rock Cafe, and they offered me a few different cities, and Las Vegas came up. And at the time, the cost of living in Vegas was dirt cheap. And I was like, wow, this is a huge venue. We have a concert venue. So, over the last 12 years, I've been able to work some incredible concerts. We had a local band that we used to do gigs with all the time called Imagine Dragons. And, they've gone on now. They're actually playing a stadium here in Las Vegas. So I guess they're stadium sized band now. But just working on all these different concerts over the years, and we've had everyone, as an 80s fan, when you can say, Adam Ant's playing my venue tonight, that's exciting. So it's been a fun gig, and I've had a lot of fun. I get to work on the music video side of it with a friend of mine, programming the music and going through the catalogs of what we're able to get and trying to add music that makes everyone happy. For me, talking music is the best thing in the world. So every day there's thousands of tourists in Las Vegas, and to make those connections with people, and you never know who you're going to meet. I was talking to a guest one day, and she's like, oh, I actually manage the drummer Clem Burke. I'm like, Clem Burke of Blondie? And she's like, yeah. And I mentioned at the time we had a music blog going on the Hard Rock website. I was like, she's like, do you want to interview him? I'm like, yes. So that led to one of my first phone interviews. I got to interview Clem Burke from Blondie. But just all these little, connections to music. It's just so fun. And, when you have someone who comes in, just loves an artist, right now, Aerosmith canceled their residency in Vegas. So the last few weeks, I've met a ton of Aerosmith fans who booked a trip, bought concert tickets, and they couldn't cancel their trip. So they're stuck in Vegas, but no Aerosmith shows. So, being able to put on some rare live Aerosmith cuts for them and give them a little miniature Aerosmith concert while they have lunch, things like that, being able to just touch people's lives through music. It's what motivates me. So hopefully I'm sharing that with people that are equally inspired by it.
Do Jason, every once in a while, do you sit there and kind of go, 10-year-old Jason would not believe that I'm sitting here being a video DJ, right? You are doing that, right? Do you think about that sometimes to go, Jason would just, young me would go, what?
Yep. I remember Lita Ford actually played a corporate gig at our venue, and I remember 14-year-old me would lose his mind right now.
Yes.
But even, I've been very fortunate. I did some work with the Duran Duran fan site, doing a blog with them. And during COVID, I started doing DJing because I sold off my instruments, and I'm to the point where working as in a band is just, it's hard, and I don't have time for that. I'm married. I have cats. So,
Yeah.
DJing is an easy way to share music with people. And, through those connections, I've actually had Duran Duran sharing some of my online DJ events through their social media. I actually reviewed one of their shows for the Hard Rock website, and they shared that. So, as a kid, they were my big band in the early 80s. So seeing my name appear on their website and stuff is just like, are you kidding? This is really happening. But, it's just, if you love music, I think people pick up on that, and, you just talk about music and share it with people, and good things happen.
Did I think that's interesting. The whole different things are going. I want to go back for a minute to during COVID. I'm a huge Penn Jillette's. I listen to his podcast every week, and so they talked a lot about him and his crew about Vegas being shut down. How did that work with you and your gig? And tell me a little bit about that.
Well, We got shut down on St. Patrick's Day. Was it 2020? I guess it was. Uh, but Vegas was not shut down nearly as long as most places. Everything
Yeah.
shut down. We reopened in June. So from towards the end of March to June, I was lucky enough. The company took great care of us. I was able to stay on for almost the duration of that
Oh, that's
layoff.
good.
And it was a weird time in Las Vegas because, the Vegas Strip is empty. It was basically people walking and riding their bikes up and down the street because there was
Hmm.
very little traffic. And
Yeah.
I do photography, so we'd walk the strip and just take pictures of these abandoned casinos. And it was almost apocalyptic. It was eerie. But then we
Mhm.
reopened in June, and it wasn't the international tourists, which I'm used to dealing with mostly international tourists
Right.
in Vegas, but it was mostly drive-in traffic from California. People who were pent up, just want to get away, so they come into Vegas for the weekends, and then weekdays would just be just empty. But now things are getting more back to normal. We have people coming from Europe, the UK especially, and then also South America. Been seeing more and more people from Brazil, so it's starting to feel like Las Vegas again. I,
A
I
little more
like that.
normal.
I like that cultural diversity. I
Yeah.
love talking music with people from the UK because I grew up on so much of that on MTV,
Mhm.
and obviously Bruce is loved there. I mean, the fans there for Bruce, and also Bon Jovi and the Killers. There's certain bands that just translate so well in the UK, and Bruce has always been one of those.
Yeah. You Bruce has played, I guess, Vegas a couple of times. Were you at either one of those shows or
I haven't.
uh
Whether it's a scheduling thing or I'm out of town, it might have been when I went to see Cowboy Junkies because I don't remember consciously missing a Bruce
yeah.
show. That wouldn't happen. If he came through my town, I would have been there. So it's
Yeah.
unusual to me that I haven't seen him since 2012.
Hmm.
I like you, kind of keep an eye out on these U.S. tour dates.
Yeah.
Uh, if anything I've learned being on the road with Cowboy Junkies is, more than one show is important because the way set lists change and the way things go night to night. I mean, when I was on the road with him in 2010, I think we covered 30 states. I mean, so night after night was something different. And I don't know, like you said, you went to New Orleans to see a show. To me, sometimes half the part of seeing the show is being in a new city and not knowing what those challenges might be. For me, I was renting cars and just driving to a new town. And, I didn't always have a great plan of what was next. And, suddenly you're driving across West Texas and you realize there's nothing in West Texas. That Austin to Albuquerque drive was one of the longest, craziest drives of my life. I felt like that was, just out there on the highway. And I was like, this is just insane. That's when it kind of dawned on me that it was towards the end of the tour. I was like, it's probably time to get back to life and get a job.
Well, Jason, I a couple of jobs ago, I was working for a company based out of Lubbock, and I lived in Dallas. And so the first time I drove from Dallas to Lubbock, I had never made the trip before, and I remember I was getting low on gas, and I made a turn, and there was a little bitty convenience store with one of those like two pumps, right? Just old, and there were cars at both of them. And I'm like, I'll just get the next one, right? And boy, I was sweating. I was sweating because there was such a long drive where there was no cell service, there was nothing. And I went, oh, rookie mistake, rookie mistake. Luckily, I made it in time. Like the first place I saw that had gas, I was like, okay, I'm stopping here. So I do know that feeling where it is just secluded.
I remember looking that day, and because the tour, let's see, we did New Orleans, then we went Houston, Dallas, Austin. I
Hmm.
remember looking in Austin, I'm like, how many miles is to Albuquerque? I'm like, oh, Lord, like, okay, that's a lot of miles. I'm like, I'm going to need to leave right after the show. I bought some
Yeah.
Starbucks, put them in my cooler. I'm like, okay, as soon as the show's over, I told the band, I'm like, look, I'm not staying in town tonight. I'm going to actually hit the road.
Yeah.
So I hit the road around midnight, just try to cut off as much as I could. And I think Austin, I was taking like a small side highway to get to the main
Hmm.
interstate, whatever that was. But that's when I discovered you have a lot of deer in Texas.
Yes.
And they were all over the side of the road, and that was freaking me out. And I was so happy when I finally got to the main highway. I actually stopped at the first truck stop I saw. And amongst all those 18 wheelers, there was a piece of junk Hyundai rental car, and I was sleeping in the back seat of that because I was like, I'm done. I was emotionally
Yeah.
drained after trying to avoid deer and stuff. But that was the fun of being on the road. I mean, one day a couple other fans met up with me on the East Coast run, and the next day I was like, all right, I think we left Syracuse. All right, today's Bethel, New York. I'm like, all right, whatever, Bethel sounds like a quaint little town, not knowing that's where Woodstock actually happened. It wasn't Woodstock, New
Ah.
York. It's Bethel, New York, and they were actually playing where Woodstock happened. There's a museum there on top of the hill, and they have a little concert venue there. So we're rolling into Bethel, and I'm like, didn't have any idea. I'm like, we're going to the site of Woodstock today,
Mm-hmm.
and the hill is still there. We went and stood at the sign where the stage had been. I'm like, this is one of the most magical days of my life. But it was just, again, you just got to head out there on the road and go see as many shows as you can and see what the adventure is.
Did have you? I know you wrote some articles. Or thought, are do you have you thought about doing your own version of an Almost Famous, like maybe a book about that adventures?
I have. I actually pitched one. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the music series 33 and a Third. Uh,
No.
it's a more of an academic style book series, but every
Okay.
single book is based on an album. And the Born in the USA book is absolutely fantastic. It totally changed my paradigm on how I saw that album.
Okay.
They're small books, very easy to read. And I pitched it. I don't think I had the right pitch at the time. But as I get my life kind of back to normal here after COVID and stuff, I'm planning to repitch it again and
Okay.
do it on the Cowboy Junkies big album Trinity session. Because I have years and years of, I've been talking with the band for years about this book project, and it's such a unique album. I mean, for a band to go, they went into a church in Toronto. They recorded this on a single microphone. The band made a circle around this one microphone. Acoustic instruments literally had to step forward or step away from the mic based on where they want to be in the mix. And this turned into a worldwide phenomenon, launched them, on all of the TV shows, got them on Saturday Night Live. But it was really them just recording in a church around a single microphone, and it just exploded from there. And it's such a unique book because that's a very unusual recording process. It's something they had done originally in a garage, and they liked the way it worked, and that's when they recorded State Trooper, and that's why it sounds so lo-fi and kind of stripped back, because they were literally just recording around a single microphone. But hopefully I can incorporate some of my stories from the road. If not, I'll probably just have to write my own self-published book. A friend of mine wrote a massive book on Cowboy Junkies recently, more on their entire history and the albums and stuff, and I was very honored to get interviewed for that. So I've been in that book quite a bit as
Nice.
quoted. And, even the New York Times reached out to me to interview me once when I was on the road. Cause I mean, I guess it is kind of weird for a middle-aged dude to be just following a band around and quitting his job to do it, but it's what I wanted to do at the time. So I did it. So hopefully I can get this all on paper one of these days and see what
Yeah.
happens.
Were you married at the time?
I was not. So that
Okay. Yeah.
made all these decisions a lot different. So
Yes, it is. Yes, yes. And I take it you didn't have cats either, because you
I
talked
did
about.
not.
Okay.
The cats came with the wife. So I'm
Okay.
very
There you
lucky.
go. Yes. I take it you weren't able to see Bruce on Broadway?
I was not. Obviously, I've watched it twice on television.
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
just wow. I mean,
Yeah.
they hear the stories and stuff, and I understand some of the criticism about how it's kind of the same repetitive thing, but it's a Broadway show, so that's how it should be.
Yes.
At the end of the day, the recordings are absolutely amazing. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's incredible. I mean, I'm so excited that he's doing things like that. I do hope that some of these artists, as they do get older, consider doing some more of the acoustic small theater tours. I mean, I think we need that, and Bruce has done that throughout his career from time to time, and that's an environment I haven't seen him in, and that's what I want to see. I mean, just to get him in a small room and hear Thunder Road acoustic would just leave me breathless.
My second show was during the Devils and Dust tour. He was at a small venue in the Verizon Center that's in the DFW area, and it was really cool to see him. I ended up I had like a really bad seat in the back. I've told the story before. Like, here was the aisle on my right hand, and there was a pillar on my left hand. So there was one of those single seats. I was like, "Hey, I'm in the building," and a guy was coming around saying, "Hey, do you want better seats? Do you want better seats?" And I kind of thought, "Oh, it's a scalper." No, no, no. And then it hit me. Wait a minute. I'm in the building. It can't be a scalper. So I went to the guy and I ended up getting me seats a little bit closer. And it was really cool to see him. And it felt like this was way before, like this is 2004, maybe, whenever Devils of Dust came out. I'm trying to think, but this was way before I even thought about Broadway. And it felt like, oh, if Bruce was doing a college lecture, right? That's what this would feel like. It would feel like you're in this audit, you're in there and he's like, okay, I'm explaining this song, and then grabbing his guitar and playing a few chords and explaining it. So yeah, it hopefully we'll do that. What are your thoughts of Western Stars and Letter to You?
Letter to You, I really, really love. I listened to it again just this week. And Western Stars, absolutely fantastic. I like that the energy is still there, but the maturity is clear. And I don't know if that makes sense, but
It
you know,
does.
it just, I like that he's doing what he wants to do. One thing, we talk about how cool it'd be to see some more acoustic tours. One thing I'm glad he hasn't done is I'm just grateful it's not like the Born in the USA 40th anniversary tour, or I'm kind of over the bands just playing a famous album in its entirety or anything like that. I'd much rather hear a deep set list with some rarities, but also stuff off the new albums, Letter to You, Western Stars, like feature this new music because it is relevant to the entire Bruce experience. I mean, I like that he's going in that direction. I'm so grateful that there's artists like that who haven't kind of, I want to say sold out, but kind of fell back on their heritage and just started kind of cashing in and reissuing things. And how many copies of special deluxe edition albums do you need from Bruce and things like that? I mean, you look behind me, I got a beat up copy of Nebraska still with a price tag on it. Actually,
Yes.
let's see what this copy was. So I paid $7.98 for it, a used copy of Nebraska. But I tell you what, there's some life in it and there's some history in it, and
Hmm.
that's Bruce. So
Yeah.
that to me, I'd rather hear that and than spend out for a brand new vinyl version of it or anything.
Yeah, I have mixed emotions because I heard a guy, I had a guy on like last year or something. I can't remember exactly when, but he told the story that it was during the reunion tour, in 98, 99. And he said that he was standing in the pit and he said, this is it. This is the ultimate. They broke up, they came back. It will never get better than this. Maybe every once in a while they'll do a, greatest hits tour and they'll go. He says, my E Street Band fandom has reached its peak. And he says, I want to go to that guy. You don't know what you've got coming. You have The Rising.
Yeah.
You have Magic. You have Wrecking Ball. You have him on Broadway. You have an autobiography coming. You have no. I mean, they're just at halftime. And like I said, I had never seen the Eagles, and so when they did Hotel California, I loved it. I was happy. There were songs that I never thought I would hear live, but I get it. Like Brian Wilson, I remember the first time I saw him post Landy, was the Pet Sounds tour.
Mhm.
And so it was great to hear him do Pet Sounds all the way through. But you're right that you have to be, and it's easy for me to say, you want to be selective, right? And so my wife asked me, because I made 4 trips during the river tour, and she said, aren't you tired of hearing the same songs? Because that's one of the things you talk about, how much you enjoy Bruce is how he changes it every day. And I said, well, one, I'm still trying to catch up because I haven't seen him that many times. And the songs I like on the river, I still like. And the songs that I don't like, I still don't like. But it was enough for me just to, because I needed that live. I hope that it isn't kind of a greatest hits when they tour. I'm going to be happy no matter what we get, but I do hope they do mix in, especially Letter to You, maybe Tucson Train or a couple other things from Western Stars. I'm hoping that it's similar to like when he was touring with Magic or, Wrecking Ball, that they mix in along with some of the classics, some of the newer stuff.
Absolutely. And I mean, and I told you how I don't want to hear Born in the USA album tour or anything like
Right.
that, but think about all the albums he could have chose to do a tour around, and The River is probably not the album that would have been top of anyone's list in terms of the casual fan. If you want to sell tickets, you're going to do Born in the USA or Born to Run. But he went with The River, which I thought was very unique. I mean, great choice. I would have loved to have seen that tour. Obviously, if he ever wants to do Nebraska, I'll swallow my pride and say, no, yeah, do Nebraska, do Nebraska. Yeah. Yes, we want an album tour, but
yes, like, oh, I didn't realize, yes.
I don't think seeing Bruce is so much about what songs he plays. It's about experiencing the energy of it and the communal feeling of being in the same room with people who have that same experience in life as you and want to share something. It's a lot of people don't like U2, a lot of people worship U2, but for me, I appreciate them on every level, and I think they put on one of the best shows in rock and roll. And when you see them I saw them at the Rose Bowl doing the Joshua Tree tour, there's something about seeing a band like that being able to connect with 60, 70,000 people and make you feel like you're in the front row. And there's very few artists that can do that. And so for Bruce, it doesn't really matter what he plays. He can play all of Western Stars, and the energy and the passion is going to be just as good as if he does some dark, deeper cuts off of The River, Asbury Park, any of those. So I think for him, he has that flexibility. He doesn't have to play the quote unquote hits because the power of his show is going to more than make up for that. And there's not a lot of artists that can do that. I mean, in terms of live performance, I put him up there right at the top with, I think U2 always delivers. If we want to go country, I think Garth Brooks is a phenomenon on live. So, those artists truly transcend just their songs and just about the experience of being there.
Do you get the same sense of community at a Cowboy Junkies show?
On a much smaller scale, yes. Actually, it's a very unique community. I think there's a little overlap with the jam bands of the world, the Grateful Dead fans and people like that who kind of got into Cowboy Junkies. And one of the cool things from day one, they were very pro taper. They always made a space for tapers, allowed the shows to be taped and traded. To the point where they started working with one of my friends who would like to record the shows, and he wanted to share it with the fans. So they actually would release his shows on the website just for people to get. And I remember my first run with the band where I did multiple shows. They had a great message board back in the day. And I met a guy through San Francisco. I had never met this person, in real life. We just were names on a message board, but I said I was coming up to San Fran to see a few shows. Anyone have any recommendations for a hotel or something? I'm a broke college kid. And he's like, well, I'm going to the show too. He's like, you can come crash on my couch. And, all of a sudden we started to get to know each other, and we're still friends to this day. But I rolled up in San Francisco, met him at his apartment. He's like, well, I'm headed to work. I'll meet you at the show. He gave me a key to the apartment. I'm like a complete stranger. But I have lifelong friends within that community. I was just talking to a few today. One's going to meet me in Arizona who, being able to go out on the road and know people and see a friendly face is a really special feeling. And we've stayed in touch. We've gotten to know each other. And whether I'm on the East Coast or the West Coast, you build friendships. And, just whether it's splitting a hotel room or having beers together before a show, that's special. And I mean, for a lot of us, we couldn't have reached the amount of shows we did if it wasn't for the kindness of strangers and people buying you a beer here and there and people letting you crash on a couch and things like that. So it's a smaller community, but it's very intense. I think the band is very appreciative of that because they're still filling theaters every single tour. Most of the shows sell out, and they haven't had a big radio hit after Geffen Records took over. In the late 90s, they did 2 albums on Geffen, but that's when Geffen got bought out and the whole industry imploded on itself. And I remember Margot had said, she's like, I'm done. She told Mike, the guitar player, songwriter, and her brother, that, look, I'm not doing the record label thing anymore. So they revamped their original record label, which they did independent album for on their first record. And they've been doing it themselves ever since. And, there's a lot of people that work with them and help them and want to be a part of it. I've been lucky. I do some of the tech stuff for them. And, the email blast that go out to 26,000 people, I help set those things up. And, through the love of that community, they're still selling shows. People are going to multiple shows, but they recognize that. And they go out of their way to change the set list accordingly, just like Bruce would do. There was one run, I'll never forget, we did 8 shows through California, and me and a bunch of guys, we did the entire run and we heard 56 different songs over those 8 shows. And I was keeping track because I'm a nerd. But there's not a lot of bands that go out of their way to make sure, like he'll say something. It's like, well, I know you're all here for like 5 shows in a row, so I'll make sure we don't play that more than once. And to me, that's what keeps you going back is the artist who actually puts in the effort, not to give you a canned set list with the same stories between the same
Right.
songs. Good to see you, Dallas. Good to see you, Las Vegas. I mean, not to call out, you're in Dallas, so I'm thinking
Yeah.
that I reviewed a John Bon Jovi show and I researched it. The
Yeah.
Bon Jovi show in Dallas review. I read the review and it talked about some of the things they did, and it was exactly the same in Las Vegas. Same set, same comments. He said Dallas girls want to party, and then in Vegas, like Las Vegas girls are the best to party with. I'm like, it's the same thing. I'm like, why am I spending money on this?
So true story. My I have some buddies I do another podcast with. It's kind of just an excuse for a bunch of us to play, shoot the blank, And so Kiss was coming to Fort Worth,
Oh Lord.
and they said, "Do you want to do a road trip?" And so in 1976, Kiss Alive and, Kiss Destroyer. Every time you got a cold, you wanted to be, Peter Criss singing Beth, right? So I'm like, I've never seen Kiss. I'm going to go. I owe it to 16-year-old Jesse to go see Kiss. So we all went. It was a bunch of buddies, and I show this. There's a picture. There was a guy standing in front of me the whole show. That's all I saw. I had to look, but they said, why didn't you tell him to shut down? I said, because this was his Bruce. You could tell he was mouthing every word. He was just having a blast. So I'm not going to. So, but if Paul Stanley said Fort Worth, I would be rich if you had $1 every time. Hello, Fort Worth. It's so good to see you here in Fort Worth. Oh, Fort Worth knows how to rock. And it's just like, good Lord. And yeah, it was the exact same. I did afterwards. I looked. It was the exact same set list. It was the exact things, and the fireworks and the flames, and it was it was fun. But it was, and I don't want to insult any Kiss fans, but it was more like going to a circus than it was a concert. And it was fun. I have no interest in ever going to see them again, but exactly. I remember several years ago, we went and saw Brad Paisley, country artist.
Brilliant guitar player.
Great guitar player. And I really loved his autobiography, and just I really think he has a fun sense of humor. So we went to the show, and then a year later we went to the next show, and my wife's like, it was exactly the same show. Like, well, technically there were a couple of songs different, but she was right. I mean, it was the same background videos, it was the same stories, and it is I remember just recently someone was talking to Penn Jillette, and there is a YouTube of him doing the nail gun routine, and they have synced up the two to show how choreographed that magic trick is. That every pause, every nod head, it was exactly the same, which is perfectly fine for a magic trick, especially one that,
it's a show.
It's a show, but you don't want that in a music show.
No, that's not where rock and roll is. I mean, I've seen Cowboy Junkies enough now where I can listen back to like all these old shows, and I remember little moments in the shows, but they weren't like anything spectacular. It was little mistakes that, I remember one song at the Fillmore in San Fran, Margot was having trouble remembering the first line to come in at the right time. And her brother always sits facing her. And I mean, he's playing guitar, but I mean, it's her big brother. And there's this kind of sibling bond, and he could just lead with his eyes. And I could watch him with his eyes kind of carry her to where she needed to come in on the first line. And it's little things like that, or, a forgotten lyric. They have a real sense of humor. Very few people pick up on it, but there's a live album they did, and she mixes up a line, and instead of basically the mix up is she says bold as milk, which is definitely not the line, but they left it in on the live album because, part of the fun of rock and roll is mixing up a line here or there and mixing up some music, missing a break. And to me, that's a band playing live. That should happen. If it's so perfectly synced that you have backing tracks and you're playing along with it, maybe I'll see the show once. I mean, I've seen Cher, so I'm
Yeah,
open to seeing about anything. And obviously, it was heavily backing tracked, and it was
but
a
I'm
show.
sure it was fun. It
Yeah,
was a show, right?
it was a
It
show, and the shows and concerts are very different for me. And
Yeah,
I love them for different reasons. And when that line gets blurred, as which Kiss is probably the reason that even happens, to me, it's not that interesting. And I'm of that age on MTV, and I don't also want to offend any Kiss Army members, but
yeah,
I still don't get Kiss. I've
yeah,
tried. I actually started a blog on my Velvet Rebel music site where I
yeah.
was going to go through each album, and I got to the second album. I just had to stop. I'm like, I just don't get it. I mean, you can make fun of me all you want, but I'll put Poison's music up against Kiss any day. They have way better songs.
Well,
They're both pop songs, but
yeah, and
Poison's way more entertaining.
like what's hilarious, right? Here's Tom Morello talking about them for the Hall of Fame and talking about how great they are. So, hey, all power to them. It was fun. I
And seeing
remember.
Tom, I should
Yeah.
mention Tom. I did not get Rage Against the Machine when they came out at all, even
Okay.
though a lot politically I'm very aligned with what
Yeah.
they stood for. But something about the singer always made me want to take the other side because he was just so intense about it. I was like, all
Yeah.
right, whatever you're fighting for, I'm on the other side just because your energy is just weird to me.
Yeah.
But I saw Tom. He opened for Bruce in Hyde Park. He did a solo acoustic show,
Yeah.
and again, one of those things you see him live and it all clicked. Like now I know why he's playing with Bruce, and it just wow, one of the best live artists I've ever seen with
Yeah.
just a guitar.
Yeah. I was able to see him 2 or 3 shows where he was filling in for Niels and not Niels, Steven. And it was so clear the joy on his face that like he's like, I can't believe I'm doing this. Like I can't believe I'm sitting here playing with the E Street Band. This is great. And so I love that joy. Um, are there any songs excluding Letter to You and Western Stars, are there songs you haven't got to hear that you're kind of mentally got your little bingo card seeing Bruce or Cowboy Junkies for that matter?
Um, Really, no. Like
Okay.
I said, for me, Bruce is just about the experience of seeing him. Nebraska is probably still my favorite album. I'd put Rising, Tom Joad, and Nebraska all up there.
Okay.
Obviously, I respect the classics for a reason, but
Sure.
there's nothing I have to hear. I just want to see Bruce again.
Yeah.
And with Cowboy Junkies, I mean, I've pestered them into playing just about everything I want to hear at this point.
That's nice.
So that is, I'm really blessed in that regard, and they've
That's great.
dedicated songs to me.
Oh, that's sweet.
It was actually right after the drive across Texas.
Hmm.
Quick story. I'll stop boring you with all these
No,
Cowboy
no,
Junkies.
no. These are great stories.
I did that drive across Texas, and I got to Roswell, New Mexico, and that was my plan: Austin to Roswell, spend the night, then head up to Albuquerque the next day because we did have one off day. But I got to Roswell, and I don't know if you've been there, but that is one weird ass place.
I
And
haven't, but it sounds like it would be fun.
yeah, I did the Alien Museum. Like, okay, cool. And it was like afternoon. I'm like, what do I do for the rest of the day? And I'm looking around Roswell. I'm like, not really a place I need to spend any more time. And I looked on the map, and it was 200 more miles to Albuquerque. And that's a Cowboy Junkie song. It's a song that they wrote as Canadians traveling around America in a van for the first time, trying to find shows, and 200 more miles. So I was like, well, that's a sign from this Cowboy Junkies spirit that I need to just drive on to Albuquerque. So I went to Albuquerque, and I think we did Albuquerque, then Phoenix, and then the last show of the tour that I was with was Denver, which is kind of special to me because I used to go see them in Denver all the time when I was in graduate school. It's where I got to know them personally. So for that final show, they said, what song do you need to hear? And, that was one where I was like, I really do have something I want to hear, and it's 200 more miles because, I think I edited up on that tour I did. I drove a little over 14,000 miles worth of travel.
Wow.
Just the driving portion, not flights to different legs.
Yeah.
So to hear 200 more miles, and they dedicated to me, and that just felt so special. And Margot told a nice story before the song about how they got so used to me that I felt like, I was just part of the tour. And Margot actually, broke up a little emotionally during the third verse. And, I was obviously a basket case in the front row. Just this was the end of it for me. And I knew I need to get back to life, but it changed my life in so many ways. And I felt so fulfilled that I was able to just put life on pause and go follow my favorite band and have that experience. And, when this Bruce tour starts up again, I can imagine there's going to be a lot of Springsteen fans who are going to find a way to take 2-3 weeks out of their lives and go hit as many shows as possible. And,
Yeah.
if you're ever on the fence about that, I am living proof. Do it. Just go.
Yeah, go make it happen. I love that story. That's a great story. Um, is there anything I haven't asked you that I should have, Jason?
I don't think so. I'm actually going to bug you in the coming weeks. I
Okay.
have a piece of Bruce memorabilia at my cafe in Las Vegas that I want your help deciphering. It's some handwritten lyrics.
Oh, nice.
Mentions Sandy, but he crosses out Sandy, but then he puts Mary. But it's not lyrics to any song that I can figure out. But
Okay.
I'm gonna, lean on you and maybe some of the listeners. If I
Oh,
give it to
I'd
you,
love that.
maybe you can all tell me, what period this was. I mean, the fact that it mentioned Sandy and Mary, I'm like, okay, well, it had to be 70s.
Yeah.
I'm just really curious. That's one
Okay.
of my
I'd love
favorite
that. That
pieces. And
sounds
it's
great.
something Bruce fans get real excited when they come to Vegas and visit.
Yeah.
I love to play some Bruce for him, but I also like to walk him and show him that. And to a lot of people, it's just a piece of paper with writing, but to a Bruce fan, that's insight into the songwriting process.
Yeah. For my birthday, my wife and my son and I all drove up to Tulsa, Oklahoma, because the Woody Guthrie Museum there is having a Bruce Live exhibit.
Cool.
It's a small exhibit, but it's a cool exhibit. I really liked it. One of the things that was really fun is there is a kiosk where Bruce talks about how you build an encore. And like he has his guitar and he says, okay, if you're playing this song, it ends in this key. So you need to figure out, okay, what song next? What's a key that starts in this? And so he starts playing another song to see the transition. And then what you got to do is you picked which decade of Bruce you wanted to play. And then it showed you 5 different gigs. You picked a gig and it showed you the set list. And then it gave you a multiple choice of 8 songs, and it showed you like there were 4 songs of the set, of the encore you pick. And so that was, and then it highlighted if you were correct or not. So that was a lot of fun. But the Woody Guthrie Museum was really interesting. And then right next door now, they have the Bob Dylan Museum.
Dylan.
And that was fascinating. That was good. And a lot of memorabilia and a lot of really interesting things. I really recommend that. That's a nice road trip that, for them being right next to each other, just makes for a really great day of doing that. So it was fun.
Well, I haven't seen Oklahoma. It's one of the only states I haven't visited. So
Yeah.
that'd be great. I was lucky when I was on the road with Cowboy Junkies in 2010. One of the shows
Yeah.
was Cleveland, and that's when the Bruce exhibit was at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And
Oh
so
yeah.
I got to visit that, and that was just an incredible
Oh
morning.
yeah. Oh, that's real fun. All right. Any final thoughts before I get to the Mary question?
No. Thank you for having me on, and you got me excited for the next tour now. So I'm like already in my mind. I'm like, all right, I've went back and just revisiting the 2012 show and remembering how inspiring that was. I think after COVID, I kind of need that energy boost again. And now I'm fired up. I'm going to see Cowboy Junkies in a few weeks. Bring on the Bruce tour dates. I'm ready for that. Hopefully he does Vegas, because what we'll do is we'll have a huge Springsteen party at the Hard Rock Cafe on the Strip. We'll blow the roof off playing Bruce on giant video screens. You come down, maybe you cut a couple episodes of the podcast.
Let's do it. That's
we can do a lot of fun Bruce stuff. So
yeah, that would be great. Let's do it. That'd be a plan. I love it. All right. If you are a fan of Jason's and maybe you're a Cowboy Junkie fan and you're supporting him, but I end every podcast with the Mary question. Jay Armstrong is an honors English teacher that recently retired, but when he was teaching, he would take his honors English class and they would break apart Thunder Road as a poem. They would look at the lyrics, they talk about the themes, they compare it to Robert Frost, Road Not Taken. And at the end of the 2 days, he would look at his class and at the end say, does Mary get in the car? So Jason, that is your question. Does Mary get in the car at the end of Thunder Road?
No, I hope not.
Okay.
To me, if we all got in the car, Bruce would have no one else to write about. I think so much of it is from all of us who didn't get in the car and take those opportunities. And that's what keeps us, so many of us, just working for a living. And just, if we go chase that dream and we achieve that dream, then in a way, I'd rather just live knowing that the dream is out there. So I always like to imagine that she didn't, and then she just kept living her life, but it was always there in the back of her mind, like what was down Thunder Road. But that's just my opinion. What's your answer? Because now I'm curious.
So 60% of my people say yes, about 40% say no. I've heard some really good stories about it. I'm an optimist, so I say yes because I
Okay.
believe in happy endings. Um,
I'm a Cowboy Junkies fan, and if you know anything about their music, there are no happy endings.
okay, that's great. So yeah, I say yes, but I'm never I think the important thing, and that's why I end the podcast with it, is the answer is important, but the reasons and the thoughts behind it. And I love how many times people say, well, Jesse, I've never thought about that before, and I know you're going to ask this, so I've been giving it some thought, and that makes me smile because, like you, in fact, my buddy Sam will always kind of sarcastically kind of yell at the E Street Radio when someone's Be the Boss and they pick Thunder Road. And he's like, yes, we all think Thunder Road is amazing. You have the chance to pick 5 songs. Why would you make a slot for Thunder Road? We all feel that way about it. And so I always joke with him, though. I said, he always says, yeah, Bruce should skip playing Born to Run and put a different song in during his live set. And I go, this is their first show.
Yep.
And if you go see Bruce Springsteen live and you don't hear Born to Run, or like you and I, we didn't hear Thunder Road, you're a little disappointed. You're happy, but you're just a little bit, right?
There's a few songs every artist kind of has to do. If the Eagles don't play Hotel California, there's going to be a lot of people that leave. And, there's more casual fans than diehards. When I go to a Cowboy Junkie show, I know 90% of the audience is there to hear Sweet Jane and maybe 1 or 2 other songs they know. And that's fine. I can still enjoy those moments. But when they play that deep song that I know that they haven't played in a while and that I know that they're playing a little differently, to me, those are the moments. And like Sweet Jane, they never play that the same. Margot sometimes does some extra vamping that Lou Reed would do in the Velvet Underground version from their live album. And to anyone else, it's no big deal. But to me, I'm like, oh, she doesn't do that every night.
Oh, that's nice.
Get some extra red wine at dinner. She's feeling it. So
that's nice.
Those are those little moments that, fans of Bruce pick up on at multiple shows.
Absolutely. All right, Jason, if someone wants to reach you, how can they?
These days, social media wise, I'm pretty much just on Twitter. I got rid of Facebook. I occasionally look at Instagram, but Twitter is where to find me, Velvet Rebel 1984. If you want to read any of my writing, I have most of it on my website, velvetrebelmusic.com, and it's music reviews. I really try to focus on new artists that music fans who grew up in the 80s and 70s will appreciate. I love new music. I'm passionate about it. I just don't think a lot of music people these days, they don't have time to go seek out new artists. So I try to highlight young artists that, if you grew up a Springsteen fan, you might like this. Obviously, a lot of Bruce fans caught on with Gaslight Anthem pretty quickly. But other bands like that, what's out there that we could get onto and get excited about? Because these artists aren't going to tour forever. So if you want to discover some new music or hear me try to get through some Kiss albums, velvetrebelmusic.com is where to find me.
I love it. That I will include a link to the website. I had so much fun. Thank you, my friend. Yes, now I'm pulling for Bruce to have a Vegas stop so that we could do a set listing Bruce blowout there at the Hard Rocks.
We will have a huge party.
That sounds great.
I promise you that. So thank you again for having me, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Sounds good. Listeners, go get vaccinated, go get boosted, and let's all be kind to each other because that's how we're going to get through this. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, listeners. We'll talk to you soon. Goodbye. Doing a podcast at times can be a one-way conversation, and I hate that. So please let me know what you like and don't like about the work I'm doing. You can reach the podcast via email at setlistingbruce@gmail.com. The show is on Twitter at setlistingbruce, and my personal Twitter is at jessejacksondfw. You can support the podcast by subscribing via your favorite podcast player and leaving us a review. The more reviews we have, the easier it is for people to find us. And please tell a friend about the podcast, especially if they love Bruce or music, because it will make a difference.
You just heard the fun talking, hard rocking, music loving, album ranking, fan thinking, joy spreading, lyric reading, story sharing podcast that is the one, the only Settlers. The theme for Settlers was written by David Rosen, used by permission.